This week in Pure Reinvention.
We are an absolute example of reinvention.
You know that's the name of the show?
Oh my God.
It's called Pure Reinvention.
Hey, is this your current logo?
Episode 58, Tom Daldin and Jim Edelman with Under the Radar, Michigan.
Engage, disrupt, adapt, repeat. You're listening to Pure Reinvention, the podcast for curious people.
Welcome to this episode of Pure Reinvention, where our mission is to create space for the unexpected by inspiring a reinvention lifestyle. This episode sponsored by MB Strategies. And for those of you listening out there, if you are interested in a sponsorship spot within the Pure Reinvention podcast, please send us a note and we'll be sure to get you the information on how your name can be a part of our sponsorship.
Let's talk about the wonderful gentleman we had the opportunity to sit across the table from.
I was very impressed with the podcast that we had. The Under the Radar men have a phenomenal story. And I think that story is really worthy of probably 2 podcasts.
Oh, it is. And so this is a 2-parter, guys, because we had such a great conversation going. We could have talked to them for another hour easily. But Tom and Jim from Under the Radar, you will learn, created this program and created this job for themselves out of necessity. It wasn't necessarily because it was something they planned on doing, but they were both in a personal crisis where they lost their jobs, lost most of their income, and were faced with finding out how to reinvent themselves.
Misty, over and over and over, we've learned that those really successful projects have at one of its characteristics at its root, disruption. And I think the backstory that we've learned from the founders of Under the Radar absolutely validates the disruption that took place within their own personal lives or professional lives, and how that was developed into the successful project that they have today.
Yeah, well, I think there's 6 seasons in, and they're doing great. They've experienced growth every season and tried new things and experimented and learned along the way, but have a really successful product.
I think people sometimes just assume that the success came naturally. And indeed, in most cases, that success came from some sort of a disruption. The interesting thing, Misty, about disruption is where the source of even the disruption comes from. For example, was the disruption situational, much like what the Under the Radar scenario suggested, or is there an opportunity sometimes to introduce disruption in a more purposeful manner?
And they talk about both of those things in our interview. So let's get out of the way, let them listen to the interview here, and we'll see you on the other side.
Welcome to this edition of Pure Reinvention, the podcast for curious professionals. We're here today with a couple of very interesting characters, and I call them characters because we've had a chance to talk to them initially, and we have both Tom Daldin and Jim Edelman from the Emmy Award-winning PBS show Under the Radar, Michigan, who have created what I think is a masterpiece.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Well, what the audience doesn't know is we've been laughing like crazy for 15 minutes before the mics were on, so we'll see if we can continue that motion while we do this.
So you guys, we've started something new this season of our podcast, which is a lightning round of 3 questions each. So
Ooh, what do I win?
A TV show.
Your own podcast episode with Mike and Misty.
Oh, great. Then I've already won.
So we're going to start with you, Tom.
Yes.
Which of Pure Reinvention's 5 fundamentals, disrupt, own, simplify, connect, or move, do you most align with?
Do I get a lifeline? Can I call someone?
You can't.
Darn it. Connect, I believe.
What's your superpower and why?
Oh, gosh, my superpower? Well, when we're driving on our adventures shooting the TV show, if someone tries to encroach into our lane, I always tell Jim, my superpower, watch this. And well, you can't see the hand motion, but it's really cool. And it keeps the car from cutting us off.
We have never been hit because of that
superpower.
Is that why, Jim, you were broadsided?
I was alone when I got hit.
Right.
Yeah.
Actually, I think my X-Men superpower is my gift for just relating to people. I'm what you'd call a regular guy. I think the biggest compliment I get is people always say, he seems like the kind of guy I'd want to have a beer with. And as long as they're buying, I'm that guy. No, but I just really love people, and I think my need to connect with people is my superpower.
No, that totally makes sense, and I agree. Last question, and I think it's the toughest.
The answer is yes.
What is your biggest professional fear, and how do you face it?
Fear of failure. Believe it or not, still, every time people say, oh, you're such a natural in front of the camera, it's so easy for you. I don't sleep the night before we film. I'm so nervous. I always worry about doing a good job. It haunts me. Even before I go to Jim's house to do the voiceovers for the show in his laundry room, by the way, he makes
fantastic voice booth.
And can I fold laundry? No, I worry, am I going to do a good job? I'm a little hard on myself in that respect. So my biggest fear is not doing a good job, and I never think I'm doing well enough, even though a lot of times I'm told I am. I'm just I'm a tough boss on myself.
What I love about that answer is A, it was honest, and B, I think so many people can relate to that. You know, it's that imposter syndrome that people struggle with. Am I doing the right thing? Are they going to call me out as a fake at any moment and
we're
cancel
totally
my TV
fakes.
show?
No, we are fakes.
Oh yeah, we make this stuff up as we go along. No, but I probably would have had a TV show years ago. When I was 8 years old, my mom, I remember, pulled over at a traffic light and stopped the car, and I was in the back seat. I was the middle child of 5 kids, and I remember she looked over and said to me, looked me square in the eyes. She said, someday you're going to have your own TV show. And I never forgot that moment. And it took me this long to do it because I'm just not I don't have much ego or confidence. So but people keep saying, no, you're pretty good at this. So I just keep forging ahead and hoping that I do a good job, and I hope for the best. So
I love it. All right, Jim, same questions.
I like own.
Yeah.
I like owning a problem. I like owning a solution.
I'd like to know what your superpower is.
The ability to drive long distances and not ask for help. There's only been a few times
except for today when you got a flat tire on the way here.
I meant from help inside the car.
Oh.
Yeah. Because it is. We get in the car and we drive long distances. We've driven, we've gone through 3 Explorers on the show. We have...
I know exactly how far we've driven. 11 billion miles.
How many commas is that?
73.
73 commas?
Yeah.
It's just commas added randomly around the page. I think it's that, that ability to drive mindlessly.
And last but not least, what is your greatest professional fear, and how do you face it?
Lately, when you own a business, my fear is, do we have enough money to make payroll? And that's been the thing that's driven me. I've been a salesperson my entire life. And that's what I am, a salesperson first. Everything else I get to do, from sound recording of Tom in my laundry room to holding a camera to driving a car, is because I made a sale. And I think for me, it's that we need to make payroll, and especially when you have employees, that's more painful. Like, we've missed payroll. We've taken ourselves out of that numerous times.
Oh yeah, in the first couple of years of the show, there'd be months where Jim and I were not taking any salary at all. We'd have bake sales and things like that.
Jim, you talked about being a natural salesman. In fact, if I understand your story correctly, you both had careers before Under the Radar became real. Yeah. So what I'm really interested in understanding is how you were able to take a current career. What were the series of events that led up to the disruption, the transition that took place? And what was what were your thoughts in how do we start to change the outcome when we now have to deal with a new set of realities? Because that disruption is step 1 in the reinvention process. And that is so important for people to understand. It's your choice to either embrace or fear. And your results speak for themselves, but you didn't know that at the time you were going through each of your individual disruptions.
Right. We are an absolute example of reinvention.
That's the name of the show?
Oh my God.
It's called Pure Reinvention.
Hey, is this your current logo? No, we really are an absolute personification of that. We totally had to reinvent ourselves. Back in 2009-10, I was flying around the country producing car commercials for the big 3 auto companies. The new Ford whatever in the snow and the mountains and the beach, making a decent living. And when the car companies all took a turn, little dip there, I lost 90% of my income. And here I was sitting with a daughter in high school, a son at Michigan State University, and I was going broke very quickly. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm responsible for this family. I have to pull up my bootstraps. I have to reinvent myself and do something. And Jim at that time,
So I was working in radio. I was a national sales manager. And, during the downturn, radio took a big hit. So on Inauguration Day 2009, the company I was working for laid off about 2,000 of us. And 75% of us were in the national sales world. So you're sitting around, you're going, okay, I'm middle-aged. I need to figure out what my next steps are. I can go back to sales, but do I really want to sell?
what a lot of people don't know is Jim and I also play in a band together. So one night after band practice, we're sitting there lamenting, here we are. How are we going to survive? We have to reinvent ourselves and do something. Well, I had connections at Detroit Public Television because 10 years before that, I tried to do a little kids show that won, Emmys, and they said it was going to be the next big thing, but I didn't know how to find funding for it, so it went away. It just died on the vine. And Jim had a great relationship with Rich Homburg at Detroit Public Television. So we thought, well, why don't we go back in to DPTV and try and resurrect this children's show? It's a time nobody, actually, to this day, I don't think anybody is doing a career series for children. There's lots of game shows, cartoon shows, science shows for kids on TV, but nobody was doing, showing kids what it's like to be an adult, careers. So we thought, well, we'll go in and sit down with the folks at PBS and see if we can resurrect this kid show that I tried to do years ago. And so we go in, sit down at the big, the big boardroom, at the big table with all the folks, and
Well, so we're 5 minutes into the meeting, and they say, we loved Bob's job. We thought it was a fantastic project. But with children's programming, you've got just a bunch of problems nowadays. You have to have doctors on staff to make sure you're not harming kids with your content. What else do you got? We're like, what do you mean? We came in here with one good idea.
yeah, it's 5 minutes in the meeting, so we're kicking each other under the table. And then all of a sudden, I think a light bulb went off over both our heads because we're both big fans of the Travel Channel, travel shows, of the Cooking Channel. And I mean, even when I was a kid, I was a member of the World Adventure Series Club at the Detroit Institute of Arts. My mom, when I was a kid, used to drive me down there and drop me off, and I had my little membership card. I go in there and sit down and watch these travelogue films. But we're both big fans of travel, so we just blurted out, how about a show where we drive around Michigan and uncover and discover the cool people, places, and things that make this state such a great place to be? And they loved the idea.
So one of the very interesting things that I heard you talk about, and this podcast is designed for other curious people who are going through reinvention to understand what the steps were that you did. One of the things that I heard that I want you to spend some time and talk about is how important it was to be able to connect with someone else that was going through a similar circumstance, that you didn't do this alone.
Totally.
That you didn't go into isolation. And I think for people going through that disruption and knowing what to do, what I heard you say was we needed each other during that time. Would you speak about how important that part of the reinvention process is?
And I'll add something, because I've gone through this reinvention a couple times. When you're in radio, you kind of get out of radio periodically. They tell you to go home. So every time I'd gone through that before, I was alone. This was the first time that I had someone who was going through a similar downturn. You didn't lose 100% of your income, but it was significant. And I think that was the other times. It was like I just jumped back into another sales job.
Right. You just repeated the same thing you were doing.
Exactly, because I knew it and I had contacts, and it was just something I did. This time was the first time we said, you know what? We're going to keep doing the same things over and over again and making that same mistake.
Yeah, the production business that I was in was drying up and going away. And I was still making enough money to just barely keep the lights on, but I was slowly, eating up my savings and everything. So thank goodness that Jim and I had each other, because together, I think it was the perfect combination of guts, talent, grit. Yeah, it's just, I don't think if we had each other to rely on, it would have happened. Because I tried it before without someone like Jim, and it just didn't happen.
So one of the things that we talk about in our process is when you have a disruption, it can either happen to you or you can make it happen. Right. The preferred method that we say is you disrupt things to keep it interesting. And I know you guys are doing that in your show. So can you talk about maybe your process? How do you keep yourself disrupted and keep coming up with new and creative ideas?
Beer. We drink lots of. No, I'm kidding.
I don't drink.
Jim doesn't even
I
drink.
supply beer. I'll throw in this is that, we're constantly looking at ways to do the show a little bit differently. In season 3, we added 10 shows to the mix. We went from 13 shows a season to 23 that season.
That's a disruption.
Yes,
that was major.
Yes, I almost went crazy.
We didn't do 23 the next season. No. There's a reason for that. But like I think we're looking at different themes of doing things. Like we added a road trip idea where we were having some problems with smaller cities. So in every episode, it's 2 cities, 3 stories each. Part of this idea was, okay, there's little towns like Kalkaska where we're not going to get 3 stories out of. What if we created a road trip where we got on a road and drove it for 5 stories? That was something that kind of made us think a little bit differently about small town stories.
Yeah, plus we're doing this for ourselves now. And actually, and we both talk about this all the time, this is the most rewarding career we've ever had. This program is helping so many small businesses and helping pump so much more money back into the economy. We actually reinvented ourselves, found a way to pay our own bills and to help people help their businesses thrive. We hear from a lot of companies, a lot of restaurants especially, that we double their business. Our food segments are probably our most popular because we figured out early in season 1 that the single biggest trigger for human beings is food.
It's interesting as you listen to these two, and we have the benefit of watching them, that how their eyes are beginning to light up when they talk about this passion and how they've really begun to talk more now from an emotional standpoint rather than just a factual standpoint. Right. So I want you guys to stay on that for a minute and talk about how you're making a difference and how not only did you find a new project which you can create new episodes of, but you're making a difference, and that really is the fuel that's pushing you to discover, rediscover, invent, reinvent on a continuous basis, because the real reward is something very different than what you've experienced before.
Well, it's something very real and tangible. Like I said, we get so many thank yous from not just businesses and places, people that we talk about in the show, because we are helping make a difference in their lives. We're getting so much feedback from our viewers saying, thank you so much for enlightening us and telling us about all the great things we have in this state that are literally 1 tank away that I can take my family to. I mean, everywhere I go, I run into people, oh my gosh, I took my family here. We went to this restaurant. We went to this park. Or the reverse side is, have you been to this restaurant? Have you featured this place on your show? So the neat thing is, it's almost like we've created this big family through our Facebook, through our what do you call it? Social media. We've created this big family, and we're all part of this big group that's exchanging and sharing. So when I was doing the big car commercials and stuff, I made a good living, and it was a good job. But like you're saying, it wasn't rewarding. It didn't. I even say in the foreword of the book that we did that if your work doesn't feed your soul, then find something that does in your spare time. We're lucky enough that we have this job that we created that's feeding our souls and helping other people and helping the entire state. So we're very fortunate. And that's why we do get very passionate and very excited about it.
Well, and I'll add to that is that when we started the show, we never really thought through what the impact was going to be. We thought, here's
a fun little show.
And it's going to pay our bills. But then you start hearing these anecdotal stories from businesses saying, we know when the show airs because our phone starts ringing. And the great thing about PBS is they rerun the show. It's nuts how many times the show gets run. In that first season, we produced 13 shows. It got aired 800 times. That's enormous for a new show. It's just grown every season since.
What, 2,000?
Yeah, just actually 2,200.
2,200 airings of 13 shows.
But what's really interesting is this family that we're connected to. So we walk into a business that we featured, and it's like we've got this fraternal, group of people who are the alumni of Under the Radar.
But interestingly enough, isn't that what businesses want to create today if they're really successful? Is that very thing that you're talking about?
Communication businesses, they do. I sold radio for a lot of years. I can count on one hand the number of clients who said, my campaign worked.
I'm stopped every day by people on the street because I owe them money. No. And the first thing they say to me is always thank you. And that, I'm going to get all. Anyway, it means so much because the show means something to them, and it's helping the state. It's helping our show. Our sponsors love our show, Misha, especially because it helps change our perception, which changes our reality, which will change our future. And for so long, we were all down on the state, and this is like I said, every time I'm stopped, the first thing people say is thank you. And that's what is so rewarding to me.
And I'll add to this. We tell good stories without being cheerleading, right? We're just telling really good, positive stories about cities, towns, and neighborhoods. But what happens is, because we're statewide, the UP needs to hear about what's happening in Detroit, because all the news that filters up to the UP about Detroit is someone got murdered, someone got thieved, or someone got murdered and thieved. It's just those three stories make it through. And conversely, the only stories that make it down to Detroit about the UP are someone got drunk while hunting. Yeah. So it's all the stereotypes about what these cities are. But hearing a story about a gumbo restaurant that's in Eastern Market that's been there for 35 years.
Or a young guy who's making incredibly high-end, high-designed furniture out of bicycle parts he's selling his stuff in Tokyo, in Amsterdam. I mean, there's people up there doing more than just shooting moose and making.
So let's run this a little bit, because I think you guys are really onto an interesting part. Misty Miller has taught me about the value of storytelling in today's communication. Now, both of you had very strong roles in communication in your prior life. So this is not new, but the way you're telling stories today is very different. And I've got to believe that your advice to companies about the role of storytelling would be very powerful. What is that advice you'd give to companies of how to make sure storytelling is a part of their message to their customers?
Well, we like to let the people that we're featuring tell the story. Instead of me getting up there and trying to be a star or whatever, or trying to make it about me. It's not about me. It's not about us. It's about them. So we try and get the best out of them and let them tell the story, because then it's more compelling. It's more real. People are more apt to believe it.
Yeah, I think kind of, how do you tell your own story? If you're of a certain age, you went through lots of meetings inside organizations about what's your elevator pitch, what's your mission statement, all total BS, really, when it comes down to it. I mean, it's good to have a mission statement. I think ours is just, we tell people, places, and things stories. Really, what's the emotion? Why are you excited to get up in the morning and do what you're doing? I think, Tom kind of mentioned earlier about finding that passion. We were in a band. We still are in a band. We can't get out of the band.
What's your band called?
Oh, gosh. The name of the band is Free Beer.
Every band jokes about it. We were the idiots.
Jim doesn't even drink, and I don't even really like beer that much, but anyway.
But it's a fun project, and it's a fun thing to do, and it hid guitars from our loved ones.
It's another thing that we're passionate about, so it's still part of our lives.
Yeah, and the fact that we're entering our 22nd year as a band, there's bands that do it for real that don't last 20. For the Beatles only lasted 10 years.
What?
But I think that passion, that finding that thing that makes you happy to go to work. I like Tom said, we've had really cool jobs prior to this. This is the best thing we've ever done.
All right. As the kid, I'm just going to say that it's all about experience. And in my experience, you hit it on the head when you said it's the why. It's the thing that we kind of preach here. That's the same thing about reinvention. You have to know why you're doing it, and then you have to do it. And so I love that you talk about that, because it is, if you understand the why, you can speak it from the heart, and you can carry that story anywhere. It builds your mission, it builds your elevator pitch, everything else.
Misty, I think the part that's really cool is what they've done is they've gone counterintuitive. Instead of most companies who tell their story and push it out, they're doing the reverse. They're letting their customers tell the story about their company. And to me, that builds that passion, that builds that excitement, that builds a story that other customers are willing to listen to, because as was mentioned with Jim, you may have a mission statement, but your customers may not care, but they're really interested about what other customers have to say about you, your deliverables, what you did that helped them, and how they might be able to use it. And so it completely changes the way we used to tell the story, and that is so powerful, as evidenced by the success you've had.
And I think that's one of the things, too, when you look at traditional advertising, when you write an ad script, and you're saying you're the best product out there, it's still an ad script. The consumer is has a huge BS filter. They know when they're being sold to. Kids know when they're being sold to nowadays. So I think the thing about us is, we don't give the access to the show through a check. You don't get to be on our show because you wrote a check to be there. It just is. I don't want someone saying, "Hey, you're going to tell the story about our really cool business methodology, but we want to talk about our eggs that we make." No, that's not. That's not why we're here. So you don't get to control the editorial message of what we do. But I think that that storytelling, that finding that message inside what you do, and that passion. I think that if you can figure out how to get passionate about something, that's a $64 million question.
Yeah, we're far from slick and savvy. We're just regular guys. Well, you do look nice today. No, we're just regular guys who I think the secret of our TV show is there's no attitude. We don't take ourselves too seriously. We don't preach. We don't cheerlead. We're just regular guys out there letting people tell great stories. We're the conduit. And I'm not smart enough to lie. So add all that together and look at me. I shouldn't have a TV show. Look at my face. But it works just because we're genuine. It's genuine, real discovery. And we're just, like I said, we're letting people connect with other people. That's what we're doing.
So, Tom, what's your one bit of advice you'd give to somebody that's going through the reinvention process right now today?
Stay positive. There were times at this show where, like, I remember, I think early in the third season, we had enough money in the bank to pay our one employee one last paycheck. I mean, it's not easy. So stay positive. Don't look back. Continue forward. Get some help. Partner with people. Ask questions. Partner with people. Like you were saying before, don't be solitary. Don't think that you've got to do it alone. Connect with people. Connect with other people. And through those connections, if Jim and I hadn't connected, we always say if we weren't in this silly little band together, we wouldn't have, after band practice, sat and commiserated and said, what are we going to do? If we weren't together, this wouldn't have happened. So I guess rely on other people.
Don't be afraid to ask for help. I think, you nailed it there. Is that, it's just, you can't be in something alone. I wish I would have disrupted things when I had a job instead of waiting until but that's the golden handcuffs part of when you're being paid, you don't think, how can I screw this up?
Yeah, we were both this show came out of necessity. Jim, I believe you lost all of
100%. Yeah, all of yours. If we had to put a number on it.
I had to do something. So I was we're tough here in Michigan. We're good at reinvention.
So you guys get to travel all over the state and tell these awesome stories, which I love. And so if anybody hasn't heard or watched the show yet, I totally encourage you to go to your local PBS station, look it up. These guys know all of them, so I could have you start listing down when all the run times.
Or go to utrmichigan.com and you can watch episodes there.
That's utrmichigan.com.
Misty, so many cool things to talk about. So let's start with the one that really captured my attention the most, and that is these individuals have a story to tell. I think we have completely minimized the role storytelling plays in success going forward. The disruption that this energy had, which created this new entity, to me was absolutely at the core of how they've been able to achieve their success.
And they kept trying to talk about the storytelling of the audience, which is an important point that we'll get to. But let's stick on their story because they do have a compelling one. They experience disruption at its finest. That the kind of all of our biggest fear is that it happens to us, that we're faced in that, oh my God, how am I going to get my next paycheck? How am I going to support my family moment? They had it.
I think that's absolutely right. I think what happens is the momentum of wherever we've been pushes us into wherever we are going. They referred to that as kind of the golden handcuffs, right? The story that's been ongoing forever and all the benefits and all of the salaries that go with the golden handcuffs story. But in reality, they didn't get a different outcome until they were either disrupted or they disrupted that ongoing story. And so to me, I think a real core lesson that I learned was how important that you can trace back the ownership of that disruption to the people who cared the most about the outcome. And so these two cared most about the outcome, the successful show that they created, and they have put the energy into and the intellect into and the energy into this, and the results have been obvious.
You're right. They I don't remember which one of them said it, but they said earlier in the interview, if we keep going down the same path, we're going to do the same thing over and over again, make the same mistakes over and over again. So they had to be forced into making different mistakes and doing something new.
Yes. And so when they began to realize that they were in a new place and they were doing new things, one of the bits of advice they gave, which I think is also extremely good, is not to be afraid to ask for help. That I think everybody who's been into a new space and has been exploring has also come back and said, if you're going to be in a new space, make sure you surround yourself with some help.
And I think that's all of the things that we try to teach in Pure Reinvention. Disrupt yourself, be purposeful about it, don't make the same mistakes, make new ones, embrace failure, but have help along the way.
I think one of the most important things that Pure Reinvention can do is create that community of interest so that when you do find yourself in a spot where you have that question or you have that doubt, there's a community of people that you can go to and talk to, and you'll find that you're really not alone. I think many times we think we're all alone, and the reality is we are far from it. Misty, I want to ask you one more question, and this was something that was mentioned in the interview. One of them said, I wish I would have been more disruptive when I was actually working.
Yeah, that was Jim.
That the comment was, I wish I would have disrupted more.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes we're afraid to disrupt when we're working for someone else.
Because you get a little comfortable in your job. It's secure. Tried and true year after year stuff. You just keep turning out the same thing because it works. And truth be told, we all have been there. It takes 2, maybe even 3 years of doing the same process, the same event, the same whatever to really feel like you own it and understand it. But that's really the time that you need to be disrupting it again, if not before that.
I think that's absolutely right. And not to be purposely negatively disrupting things, but to disrupt for a very positive outcome. Just disruption being more to change an outcome to have it even be more positive than the outcome you had before.
Right. We're not advocating just to create chaos for chaos sake. It's to create chaos that steps you into the next fundamental, which is owning it. So you're creating that chaos so you can take control of it and realign it to where you want to see it go.
I think you have to give a lot of credit to both Tom and to Jim for creating and developing and sustaining in this Under the Radar project that now has gotten tremendous traction, great followers. They were just a great interview.
If you guys are an Under the Radar fan that's listening to us, please share your comments. We want to hear what you guys think. We were so excited to have them on our show, and we will have a second part with them next week, so please stay tuned. You can subscribe to our podcast, follow us on Facebook, and get a lot more really great interviews like this. Coming up also in part 2 of our interview, we'll talk more about a Detroit focus with Tom and Jim, what they've learned from the city. And they have a book. They have a book called Under the Radar Michigan, the first 50 episodes. So they'll talk a little more about that. You can buy that on at your local independent bookstores.
So stay tuned for next week's episode. Sure to please and give you a little bit more in depth about what's really happening under the radar.
And remember, if you're ready to make a change, make it a change that lasts. Make it Pure Reinvention.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Pure Reinvention. Keep the conversation going and get alerts when new podcasts are up by following us on Twitter at Pure Reinvention or sign up for our mailing list at purereinvention.com.